Next, we honor Vandy's Flash.
Vandy's Flash was the first gelding to be the world champion racing American quarter horse. A horse of his caliber deserved great respect, and he got it, wrote quarter horse historian Nelson Nye. In his best years, not a bangtail could touch him. He took the best quarter racing could throw at him and, pretty near laughing, ran plumb away, furnishing sports writers with reams of ecstatic copy. Bred by D. Garrett of Pawhuska, Oklahoma, the world champion gelding was by Garrett's stallion Vandy and was foaled in 1954 out of the Leo mare Garrett's Miss Pawhuska, who in 2006 was enshrined in the American Quarter Horse Hall of Fame. Bred to Vandy, Miss Pawhuska produced 6 starters, including champions Vanetta D. and Vanavar, track record setter Van Sarita II, and AAA sprinters Vandy's Betty and Miss Vanity. With speed to burn, Vandy's Flash stood atop the world, but it was not only speed that got him there. The gelding was as tough and hard-knocking as a horse could be. Unraced as a 2-year-old, he was sent to the track at 3 in 1957, where in his first season of racing he won 6 of 19 races. The high mark was a score in the Ruidoso Derby at Ruidoso Downs, where in 2007 the gelding was inducted into the Racehorse Hall of Fame. Vandy's Flash followed as a 4-year-old in 1958 with a win in the Ruidoso Maturity and the title as champion gelding, but had an off year in 1959 when he failed to win a stakes race. Then in 1960 he showed everyone and his uncle why he got so much space from sports writers, Nye wrote. From 13 starts he took 7, placed in 2 and showed in 1. Collecting bankable assets in excess of $38,000 while running against the best horses in training. Vandy's Flash opened the 1960 season with a 350-yard track record in the Josie's Bar Handicap, and less than a month later set a 21.7-second world record at the quarter mile while daylighting champions Triple Lady, Aunt Judy, Miss Loughton, Breeze Bar, First Call, No Butt, and others in the Los Alamitos Championship. He wrapped up his World Championship campaign by becoming the first horse to win both the Los Alamitos Championship and the Autumn Championship in the same year. That last race, the forerunner to today's Grade 1 Champion of Champions. Vandy's Flash raced another 4 years, setting a track record at Sacramento and outrunning champions Anadile and Dairyman in the Barbara B. Handicap at Los Alamitos. In his career, he went through 4 owners and several trainers, but in the year of his greatest triumph was trained by L.G. Brandy Culver, who sent him to post in the red and white colors of John D. Askew of Fayetteville, Arkansas. In his last year on the track, the gelding was owned by Park W. McAvoy of South Laguna, California. Vandy's Flash went into retirement in December 1964 after nosing champion Straw Flight in an allowance race. Winning more races than any sprinter before him, the gelding exited the track with 28 wins from 106 lifetime starts, including another 15 seconds and 11 thirds. With 71 finishes in the money, Vandy's Flash earned more than $100,000. That was, noted Nye, a pretty fair score in anyone's language. This year, we add one more great accomplishment to the gelding's record: induction into the American Quarter Horse Hall of Fame.
Please welcome to the stage Bobby Mitchell representing Vandy's Flash. Bobby, would you like to say a few words?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't want to say a lot, but say a little.
Go for it.
Well, this is not very usual for me, and I didn't really have the horse when he set those world records. But I knew him, and he was stable rider in the barn next to me. And I've never saw a horse that was that fast. It's still unbelievable. Anybody that knew him or saw him run would tell you the same thing. But I was lucky enough that the year that he set his world records, right after that meet, John Askew decided to sell him. And my owner called him and made a deal with him, and he said, "Bobby, would you like to have Vandy's Flash?" I said, "God, Bob, I'd love to have him." And anyway, I got him, and we turned him out. He'd been up a while, and we wanted to rest him, so we turned him out a while, then brought him back in the spring. And one morning I went to qualify him, and he kicked out over the kickboard in the gate and tore everything loose in his left hind leg, and we thought he was through, absolutely thought he was through, because he was 7 then. And so we turned him out up to Brace of Del Mar Ranch. And Bob had Stan Emmonshaw working for him at the time, and Stan was a really good horseman. Stan called me about a year later, and he said, "Bobby, this old horse is doing so good." He said, "I think we could put him back in training." And I said, "Well," he said, "what would you think about if I started riding him up in the hills and just see if he stays sound?" I said, "Well, God, that'd be great, Stan. Go ahead and do it." So he did, and he rode him for a couple months up there, and he called me one day and he said, "Bobby, take this horse over to that little meet over at Phoenix and see if you can at least get a race in him over there, and just try him and see if he's going to stay in one piece." Well, we didn't have a lot of time, but he had so much class. We took him over there, and I wind up, he was ready to run about 100 yards, and I stuck him in a race over there, and he went for fun. He just galloped. And so I called Bob Grant, the owner, that night, and told him, I said, "Bob, I'm going to take him back to Los Alamitos and run him once this fall, because the horse is not ready. He's not no part of himself yet. He's fine, but he's just not tight and ready to run." I said, "What I'd like to do with him, I'd like to take him to Los Alamitos and run him once, and then take him Bay Meadows and try and win the championship up there with him, and then bring him back to Los Al. By that time, he'll be really, really himself again." And so he said, all right, he agreed to it. So I took him back to Los Alamitos, started him one time, and he beat some nice horses there. And he was really coming around good. So then we went to Bay Meadows with him and run him the one time up there and win the championship with him. And that night, Bob Grant called me and fired me. Never did ever give me a reason for it or anything. The only thing I can think of, I just wasn't running him enough to suit him, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, we went back a year later, and Stan Emmonshaw and I were in a movie down in San Mateo, and Stan asked me, he said, "Bobby, did you hear that old Flash is for sale?" I said, "Who the hell would want him? He's 10 years old." He said, "Last year he can run." I said, "What would you want him for, Stan?" He said, "You know him." He said, "You could get him running again." He'd start him in his 9-year-old year. They'd start him about, after he'd win the stake at Bay Meadows, they'd start him 7 or 8 times during the year. Never even got close with him, never won a race with him. And anyway, we wind up, I told Stan, I said, "Well, what does Bob want for him?" He said, "I think he wants $5,000 for him." I said, "Well, God, he's not worth that anymore." I said, he's through." And he said, "Why don't you go out there and call him?" So I went out in the lobby at the show and called Bob, and I said, "Bob, do you want to sell old Flash?" He said, "Yeah, I do, Bobby. I'm tired of him." He said, "It's been a disappointment this year, and I just don't want him anymore." I said, "Well, did you know that the old horse is in tomorrow?" He said, "No, nobody's called me nothing." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you $3,500 for him if Park McAvoy will okay it." I said, "Park told me one time if I ever wanted to buy a horse, that he'd buy him for me." So he said, "Well, I'd like to see you have him back. Maybe you can do some good with him this year, because it's his last year." And so I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll tell you what, we'll take him for $3,500, and you can have the purse that he wins tomorrow, and I'll pick him up at the receiving barn after the race if he's okay, if I think he's okay." So he said, "Go right ahead, and you can have him." So that's how I got him back when he was 10 years old. That was in February, I believe. And I run him once or twice there at Bay Meadows that meet, and he got beat that far twice in the mud and should have galloped both times. And then we moved over to Sacramento, and I might have run him once there too, and I'm not sure about that. But anyway, the next time I run him, he brought a real fast, lightning fast racetrack, and he ran 400 yards and 20 flat, equal the world's record at that time, 400 yards, when he was 10 years old. And then after that, he just went right to running again. I beat the best horses with him at Los Alamitos that spring, and you just have no idea how much he meant to anybody that knew him, how much he meant to us. He was a great, great horse. And I want to thank Frank Merrill and Don Bird and Stan Emmonshew for helping me so much getting him in the Hall of Fame. Frank had to do the most of it because Don left us and Stan left us, and I give up because I couldn't get him in. And I always thought he should have been in 40 years ago. But anyway, I really appreciate him getting in the Hall of Fame, and you have no idea how happy we all are. Thank you.